May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So today's reading is a story familiar to many of us. We hear it often enough that we all know the story of doubting Thomas. The story about how he was missing when the disciples were gathered in the upper room and Jesus appeared to them. And how he didn't believe their story. But then Jesus comes a second time when Thomas is with the disciples and shows him his wounds. And Thomas believes and professes his faith in Jesus. Now, there are several things within this story that makes me wonder. For example, where was Thomas during this first visit with Jesus? The events of the past several days were extraordinary. The entrance into Jerusalem, Jesus captured and put to death. His body isn't in the tomb where it was laid. The disciples are scared about their safety, worried that those who killed Jesus might come after them too. So where was Thomas? Well, we'll be wondering on that another day, another sermon. For today, what struck me this time in sitting with this reading was just an enormous sense of wonder and appreciation. This huge sense that given everything that has occurred in our readings over the past few weeks, everything that we know about the story of the early church, the challenges, the persecutions, the martyrdoms, everything. With all that, we still have this story. We have the story of Jesus. The story of his life, his death, and his resurrection. Despite everything we have heard, and we can ponder the story of Jesus. The Easter message has come to us through generations who were moved by the story and their experience of Jesus. Without them, we would not know the story and the message of Jesus. Over the centuries, despite the challenges, the hardships, everything that the early church experienced, everything encountered over the ages, everything. With all that, we still have the story. We have the story about the message and the experience of Jesus. By rights, we probably shouldn't have this story. With all the dangers, the challenges of the early church, the subsequent centuries, we probably shouldn't even know about Jesus, about his life, his ministry, about his death and his resurrection. We probably shouldn't have heard this story at all, but we have. So it makes me wonder, this story must have had such an impact on the hearts and the minds of people throughout the centuries, despite all the challenges endured and experienced through all the centuries. This story must have so radically influenced their hearts and their minds that despite the challenges they faced, they continued to share the story. They continued to share the story of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection despite everything. Just imagine. Imagine a story that you would want to continue to share, that you would want to be sure to share with others, to be sure to pass along. Imagine a story that struck you so much, that had such an impact on you so great that you had to be sure to share it with others so that it could be told beyond your own generation, beyond the challenges of your present day. Wow, what a story that must be. What an impact that story must have on you. I think when we begin to wonder about how the story of Jesus has come to us over these many centuries and through so many challenges, I think we begin to realize that unless we take the challenge to be sent, unless we understand the impact that this story has on us so that we want to share it, that we want to share it despite all challenges, despite everything, I think we begin to understand that future generations will not know the message or our experience of Jesus unless we tell it. Future generations will not know the story of Jesus unless we share it. Now, I know it can be difficult to share our story and our experience of Jesus. We could still be afraid, scared, huddled up in the upper room like the followers of Jesus were in our reading today. Maybe we don't know how to go about sharing the story. Maybe we are not sure whether others will even listen. But what if? What if we understood how we fit into this journey of followers in which the story relies upon us to share it in order for it to continue? What if we understood that telling the story of Jesus is really about telling our story? About telling how the story of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus influences me, how it affects me, how my experience of Jesus, his teachings, his life and ministry, how it impacts me, how the story of Jesus motivates my thinking and my actions. In today's reading, Jesus tells Thomas, "Put your finger here. Reach out your hand." And in many of the stories of Jesus, we hear Jesus tell the person to do something. Reach out your hand. It takes some effort on our part. We need to take some effort if we are going to respond to Jesus in our life. I think when we understand that we are a part of this crowd of followers traveling with Jesus, that we are one person in our own generation, called to tell our story about how Jesus has affected us, about how the story of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection is important to me. I think then we will make the effort. I think then we understand how we fit into this entire story. I think we then feel thankful for those who have come before us and shared their story, shared their experience of Jesus, so that we know the story of Jesus. And we understand that we are sent to be a cog in the wheel of the furthering the story and experience of Jesus, so that those who come after us, years, decades, centuries after us, can hear the story as well. They can hear the story of Jesus and know that the story and an experience of Jesus impacted us in such a way that it was important for us to pass along the story, no matter what. Like I said, I think by all rights, we shouldn't have heard or even know of the story of Jesus. But it is because of many people over the course of several centuries who were so captivated and so moved by the story of Jesus that they shared their story at all costs. And then we can understand our place in our call of being sent to share the story. And we can understand that it's only by our passing the story along that it can pass onto future generations. So I'm wondering, what are we to do with the story of Jesus? What are we to do to make sure that centuries from now, people still hear about the story of Jesus and the impact it has had on us?